damn it. Guess we're gonna edit that out. All right, that's centered. All right, my name is Tony Berard. I couldn't get my other camera to do USB streaming, so this is just going to be a single camera take. All right, so we're going to explain how chess is played, the legal rules. We'll start with the easiest one, the rook. The rook looks like this, little tower. Sometimes they're called castles. All right, so the rook moves like a plus sign. We say orthogonal movement for those of us who are prim and proper. I've heard it called on the flats also. So they move like this. If you have a piece in the path, then the rook can move and capture. It occupies the square of the opposing piece. You can never capture your own pieces. So the rook is known as a major piece, a major officer, if you will. So, all right. The next one is the bishop. All right. I should put it over the middle of the board, I guess. All right, so this is the bishop. The bishop's hat is called a mitre. That's in real life. They wear those things, and they have a connection to God, so to speak. So they're part of the church. All right, the bishop moves like a diagonal. I say that tongue-in-cheek. All right, so if this opposing piece is here, you can travel along the diagonal and capture it. Just like the rook did. You occupy the piece, the square that the piece was on, and the piece gets ejected from the game. So now it's no longer in the game. Alright, so bishops move along the full length of their diagonal. It used to be like pre-1495, 1475, somewhere in there. Bishops, I think they had to go 2 units diagonally. You couldn't even move them 1 unit. I think that was the rule. But bishops got upgraded to be able to go the full length of the diagonal and any number of squares. So at the beginning of the game, you get 2 bishops. So you get what's called a light squared bishop and a dark squared bishop. Because they stay on the diagonal, they never leave their color. So that's why this one's called the light squared bishop, because it stays on the light squares. Black also gets 2 bishops. Black gets a light squared bishop and a dark squared bishop also. Bobby Fischer's favorite piece was the light squared bishop. Little trivia there. All right, we next move to the knights. So I will use these pawns as markers. Where's my other pawn? Here it is. So the knight can move and capture any one of these pawns. It moves in an L shape, we say. Up 2 and over 1, over 2, up or down 1. So if you move 2 places like a rook, and then 1 place like a rook in its other direction, then that will give you all the options. Some people will say, oh, you can move diagonally 1 square, and then further away from your starting point like a rook. There's a lot of different ways to describe it. I've heard also a 2 by 3 square. So can you imagine? Let's see, let me do it this way. So here's the 2x3 square visualization. So the knight is on one corner of the 2x3 square. The knight can then teleport to the opposite corner of the 2x3 square. So that's another way to think about it. The knight does not need to, or the knight can jump over pieces, so it teleports. So if all these pieces were here and this knight didn't want to do whatever, it could just jump there. So there's the knight. Well, I guess there's something else I need to say about the knight. Notice the knight is starting on a white square. And look at all the squares it can hop to next. They're all black squares. So the knight will always change the color of the square on every single hop. So some players might notice things like, well, if it wants to hop here, that's going to require 2 color changes. 1, 2, or 1, 2. If it wants to land here, well, it can't go there in 1 turn, so the least it could do is 3 turns. 1, let's see, how about this? 1, 2, 3. So, being mindful of the color of the square that a knight is on and where you want to be able to get to is one of the key components of mastery of chess. All right, next, so I did the bishop, the rook, the knight, so the queen is next. So the queen combines the powers of the rook and the bishop. So she can move the full length of the board like a bishop and like a rook. From the center, one of the center 4 squares, that's 27 squares that she commands. By far the most powerful of any piece. And she captures opposing pieces. Well, I shouldn't put it there. That's the promotion square. Shouldn't put it there either. Let's put it there. So she captures just like the other pieces. You occupy the square of the opposing piece and eject the opposing piece from the game. So that's the queen. She combines the powers of the rook and the bishop. In previous versions of chess, and you can even go to chess variant sites. I think Courier Chess has a piece called the Abbot, and that is it combines the powers of the rook and the knight. There's another piece, I think Capablanca wanted to do that, so if you look up Capablanca Chess, that has a piece that combines the powers of the bishop and the knight. So, thought I'd toss that out there. All right, the last piece we need to discuss is the king. The king moves 1 square in any direction. I'll put a little fence around the king. Here. All right, so the king can go to any one of these squares marked with a pawn. So it's 8 possible. If your king's on the edge of the board, it reduces the amount of squares available to it. Here there's only 5 squares. And if you're on a corner square, now the king only has 3 squares that it can go to from where it's at. So, mathematically speaking, it's easier to checkmate a king in the corner than on the edge than on one of the middle squares. Simply because you have fewer squares that your pieces need to cover. All right, that's how the pieces move. There's a couple of extra rules. So let's say black is coming this way and black has a pawn on the 5th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We call them ranks on the 5th rank. So if black has a pawn on the 5th, at the start of the game, white will have 2 pawns here. And so if a pawn gets to here, and if white advanced 2 squares a couple centuries ago, maybe 3 centuries ago, I don't know, at some point in the past, somebody decided that, oh, look, did I cover the pawns? I didn't even cover the pawns. Guess we have to talk about the pawns first. Then I'll get to the special rule. All right, pawns can move up 1. Okay, the pawns start out, their home rank is the 2nd rank. So white will have a row of pawns here, and black will have a row of pawns here. The pawn, in isolation, can move up 1 or 2 squares on their initial turn from their home rank. After that, they only move up 1 rank at a time. And you only get to move 1 piece in chess, or except for castling. I'll get to that shortly. On your turn, you get to move 1 piece. All right, so if you get your pawn to the 8th rank, you get to choose any piece, even if you already have it. So most people will choose a queen, and then, because then they gain a lot more power. But sometimes, like let's say black was here and here. If white moved up like that, white could under promote to a knight. And then it's check, and then you win the opposing queen. So that would be a pretty big swing in the point material. My speaker just turned off, but I'm not using it. Hello? All right, the microphone is still working. All right, so the pawn captures diagonally. So if there was a piece here, white is going that way. So you can capture diagonally. Well, not that you can capture, you can only capture diagonally. 1 square diagonally. So 1 square diagonally. You cannot move diagonally without a opposing piece there. You can only go diagonally if you capture. So the only way a pawn can leave the file that it's on, so like this would be called your E pawn because it's on the E file. Your E pawn stays as an E pawn all the way till promotion, unless it dies and never makes its promotion, unless it captures. So it's quite common to see something like this. Black's F pawn can capture white's E pawn. Now the F pawn is no longer an F pawn. It's now an E pawn. So, all right. So that covers the basic pawn things. So now let's talk about the capture and passing that I was trying to get into a moment ago, but I had realized I had jumped the gun. All right. I see my board is slightly off kilter. All right. So if white advances 2 squares because it's legal for it to do so, somebody a couple centuries ago decided, oh, the black pawn was violated. So they said that black could capture onto the capture square as if the white pawn had advanced only 1 square. It's the same as if white had done that and got captured. So for the following turn only, so if white does this, on this turn, black has to do that right now if it wants to capture that pawn. It's given one opportunity to capture it. If you don't, let's say you do that, and it's black's turn and black does this or something, well, now this pawn has lost the opportunity to capture here forever. So you get one shot and one shot only to do that. It's possible to be violated twice. Let's say black does that, and then white does this. Well, now white violated this capture square on the previous turn, and this capture square on this turn. And maybe this time black decides to capture in passing. So that's capture in passing. Is that a good rule? I don't think so. It's like, is this guy Rambo and he can just run, you know, out into the enemy camp and still have rights without, you know. So anyway, all right, so there's my little soapbox speech on capture and passing. All right, next we're going to talk about castling. It's a special case rule. So this is the starting position of the king, and this is the starting position of the rook. If it's white's turn, white can move the king 2 squares towards the rook, and then put the rook on the hopped over square by the king. That's a special move in chess called castling. The king starts here, and the other rook, where's my other rook? I don't see my other rook. Oh, here it is. All right, it's a similar format. You move the king 2 squares towards the rook, and put the rook over the hopped over square by the king. You can't have moved, if you move the king during the game and then come back, you've already moved your king. You lose your castling rights. That's a rule. Is it a good rule? I don't think so, whatever, but I didn't write the rules for chess. I invent other games. The other games that I invented are better games than chess, so I can only tell you what the rules of chess are in this video. All right. So there's another rule. These are called the stipulations to castling. Let's say black has a bishop here and it's covering that square. You are not allowed to castle across a check. So this 2 square hop over is not possible because the bishop covered that square. It's perfectly fine if the rook is under attack. You may castle. The rationale for this is that the king is inviolate in chess. You are not allowed, it's like untouchable, invincible, you know, it's sacred, maybe might be another word. Inviolate is the word they use though. So you cannot capture the king. And so this bishop being here, the king being inviolate is not allowed to even pass over the square. They're saying it's illegal, and so the king is stopped from doing so. I think that's the rationale I read once upon a time. Maybe I saw it in a video, but probably read it. All right, are there any other stipulations? All right, so if you move the rook, let's say you move the rook here, and later on you move it back. Well, you move this rook, you lose castling rights to this side. But if you haven't moved this rook yet, you can castle over there, not over here. Victor Courtney was a grandmaster. He was once in a game and his rook was under attack. He had to go ask the tournament director if it was okay for him to castle if his rook was under attack. So he wasn't sure of the rule. Well, yes, you can cancel. You can castle if your rook is under attack. the rule stems from the inviolateness of the king. If your king is under attack, let's say the bishop was here, and let's also say we have a pawn protecting it so the rook won't just capture it. All right, so this king is in check. It's not allowed to castle to either side. Why? I guess it stems from the inviolateness of the king. I'm not sure. That's not a rule I would have. If you're in check, that would be an ideal time to castle. Now you're not in check, you're tucked over into safety, whatever. So, but the rules of chess says nope. If you're in check, you cannot castle. That's silly to me. Do you get to move your king? Yes, that's fine. Well, then why can't you castle? There's no reason within the rules of chess why the king shouldn't be able to castle while it's in check, because it gets to move while it's in check. That's called an inconsistency, but again, I'm not allowed to change the rules of chess. You have to invent your own game to make your rules better. But according to chess, nope, the king cannot castle now. He just has to move. And that'll be that. All right, I think that covers all the rules. Oh, I did promotion. Okay, so that's all the rules of chess. I will next demonstrate a basic checkmate. So let's give black the extra piece. All right, let's say it's black's turn. Black can say check. Oh, I guess I should say this part first. These kings are what we call in opposition. The three squares between them are shared as possible capture squares. And so the king cannot go here because it puts itself in check by the other king. It's illegal. It doesn't even happen. It's not even possible to put the king here. It's illegal, I guess is what I should say. It's illegal to go here, here, or here. So these squares are called in opposition. So the king kind of acts a little bit like a rook in this way because the forward squares of this king are all blocked. So this king is acting like a rook. So if you can get the opposition, then that can help you. All right, I said that to be able to say now the rook checks the king because the opposition covers that and the rook covers the second slice. If this is a hamburger, the two parts of the bun and then the burger, the king covers the top bun, the rook covers the meat, and so the only thing left is the bottom bun. And so the king must go backwards. Let's say it wants to go towards the rook to attempt to capture it on the next time. Well, then black will do this, setting up the opposition, and now it's white's turn. So white's going to go there, trying to attack the rook. Well, the rook has long range powers, so it can go here. So now the rook is covering the top bun. The king is not covering the full top bun because it doesn't have opposition. So, but it's white's turn. Oh, there's another, I guess I missed a rule. In chess, there's a rule called the must move rule. You don't get to decide if you want to move or not. You must make some move. It doesn't matter if it's forward or backward, but you have to make a move. You can't just say I pass. So if white goes here, then the opposition is going to hold, and then the rook can check, forcing the king on the back rank. So white probably doesn't want to do that. So white will try to survive here. And then the rook can come here to force white on the back rank of this, although it would be a file in this case. So you could do that. Or you can put the king here to take the opposition because white has run out of runway. So then if white goes here, now the opposition is established again, Now you can check, forcing the king onto the back rank. So there's a couple of ways that black could have proceeded. So now white is forced to the back rank. White will probably go here because you don't want to go in the corner. It's too easy to checkmate there, per previous discussion. So then black will go here, taking the opposition. So then where will white go? If white goes here, then you can stay here and swing the rook over. Because then if you go back, then it'll be checkmate. So white has to flee. And then black will stay one step behind, leaving the opportunity for white to take the opposition. White can either take the opposition and get checkmated or run towards the corner. Either way, there's going to be, running out of runway. So white will probably do this. Black will stay one step behind. Again, if white wants to go into the opposition, checkmate. So white will run this way. Black will stay one step behind. Now here, the opposition could be taken and then checkmate. White has one more trick up its sleeve, and that's the end of the line. Then black will go here. Now, because of the must move rule, white must finally go into the opposition and then checkmate. The rook is considered a major piece in chess. If the pass option were allowed, then the rook would be a minor piece. Because once you get to a position like this, let's say, from the center, the king will just say, pass. Okay, you can do check, then we're in a similar position. Maybe the king will go here, pass. There's no way to get the king losing ranks, to get corralled on the back rank. Zugzwang is the term for that. The rook requires Zugzwang. Zugzwang is a German word that chess has borrowed. It means constraint to move. And so your position is fine as it is, but because of the must move rule, you have to make a concession somewhere. And so the concession is this. You have to make a move, and then the rook can corral off a rank. So now the king's survivable area is a 2x3 area. But here the king's survivable area is a 2x4 area. So that I've shown you a basic checkmate. It is possible to force a checkmate with bishop and knight. I guess we'll put it here. This is a very complicated discussion. The best players in the world can do this, so they might. I've seen some games where you do get a bishop and a knight versus the lone king, and if there's very little time on the clock, the person with the king will continue to play, even though it's basically a lost cause for them, theoretically. But because of the time constraints, the person with the winning power might fail to do so. This person does not get to win the game. It's not possible for them to win. But if they get this person to flag, then they get a draw. I think that's the rule. There's another rule in chess where if there's 50 turns without a pawn move or a piece capture, then the game is ruled a draw, because that's like a fortress, they say, where no pieces are taken but many, many moves go by. So the chess bureaucracy, if you will, came up with the 50 move rule. You have to show progress in the form of a piece capture or a pawn move. Those are considered significant events in chess. There's another way to draw. I guess I missed some of my details here. Another way to draw is with what we call stalemate. A famous example let's say it's black's turn. Black can checkmate by going here or here from here. But let's say black didn't realize that, and black went here. Well, now there's no legal moves to the king. The queen covers this square. Both the king and the queen cover those two squares. But the king is not in check. Is that a good rule? Well, I don't get to say. I didn't design chess. But the chess thinking is the king is not in check, and its only legal moves are to put itself in check. So this is called a stalemate. There's a clash in two rules of chess. The first rule is that you must make a move. So if you must make a move, those are your three possible choices. But there's another rule in chess that the king is inviolate. It's not legal to put the king in check. So that violates the inviolateness rule. That violates the inviolateness rule. And this violates the inviolateness rule. And so, which rule wins? Does the must move rule win, or does the inviolateness of the king rule win? Well, neither rule wins. That's like the immovable force versus, or the immovable object versus the irresistible force. Neither one wins. So they call this a stalemate. If I had my druthers, which I do, in my game called dice chess, or not dice chess, fighting chess, you get to pass. And so the king would pass, and then one more move would be made, checkmate. And I would also declare the king not inviolate. So you could make a move and then capture the king. Both of those rules are in my game dice chess, but they're not in chess. Here it's declared a stalemate. I consider that a very bad rule, but a lot of people play chess, so who am I to argue with them? Play fighting chess instead. All right. I believe that's everything for chess. We do have a website called digital-gaming-network.com. Give that a whirl. We have chess and fighting chess on there. And you can play our bot. You can get a free account and play either bot. That should be working. I have a programmer who is constantly upgrading our site. So sometimes it goes down because he's testing things, but most of the time it should be up and running. Digital-gaming-network.com. So the name of our company is Digital Gaming Network. All right. Guess I'll put the two kings on the board. They're shaking hands. Have a great day.